She's an Emmy-winning journalist from the White House to war zones, telling all sides of the story. This is The Rita Cosby Show.
As the president's poll numbers plummet, they are now at 33%. And it's because even when Democrats and independents are asked about the president, they basically say, you know what? We don't really have a sense of strong leadership. That's where he seems to get an F from almost everybody. Do you think he is leading the crisis right now in our country? Do you think he is leading the crisis in the world? And when you have Russia that is doing tests on new intercontinental ballistic missiles, brand new ones, they're testing some of the most sophisticated devices in the world. They are squeezing Mariupol. I mean, that is a human catastrophe. They're trying to starve them out. I mean, the stakes couldn't be higher. And we have a president who is not cognizant and not clear in his speaking. And I want to get your thoughts tonight on how dangerous this is. You know, at first it was like, oh, it's kind of funny. It's like Funny Joe. You know, sometimes when you see the Easter bunny pushing him around a little bit, you kind of go, oh, okay, well, that's kind of funny. It's Easter. It's something silly. You know, this is really serious stuff. And tonight, I actually am really concerned. I'm concerned for our country, and I'm concerned for our White House, and I'm concerned for Ukraine, that he can't keep his message straight. And he also seems to be tipping them off as to where the U.S. is going. And I want to hear your thoughts on his latest gaffe, because remember the whole minor incursion comment that he made? He made early on the comment that, you know, well, if, you know, Russia makes a, quote, minor incursion into Ukraine, then maybe we may not respond. And everybody's like, whoa, what are you talking about? Why would you ever say that? You want to say, Vladimir Putin, don't you dare step 1 inch into Ukraine. Well, obviously, he opened the door there, and we know what has happened now. There were 70,000 Russian troops amassing right there on that border. They stepped right in. Many people said that Biden's comments helped to give a green light to Vladimir Putin. I mean, obviously, he had a green light as it is, but it certainly didn't help when you have a U.S. president who says, oh, well, if it's a minor incursion, basically there'll be a minor or maybe no reaction. And somebody like Vladimir Putin, well, guess what? He smelled blood and he went for it, as we know, and it has been horrible and disastrous and just catastrophic consequences for Ukraine. And then just a few hours ago, when I heard the president of the United States saying this, my jaw dropped. And I want to get your take on this, because to me, this is a very dangerous comment. Remember, Russia right now is encircling the city of Mariupol. They are slaughtering people. They are slaughtering women and children. They're torturing them. They are starving them. They're executing them. We've all seen the images. And they are doing that in Mariupol right now. The stakes couldn't be higher. And we have a president who basically is about to give away part of Ukraine to Russia. Take a listen to what our very weak president, I think, said just a few hours ago.
Our unity at home, our unity with our allies and partners, and our unity with the Ukrainian people is sending an unmistakable message to Putin. He will never succeed in dominating and occupying all of Ukraine.
He will never succeed in dominating or occupying all of Ukraine. Forgive me, Mr. President, the answer should have been he will never succeed in getting any of Ukraine. And that, to me, just hearkened on the whole minor incursion comment that he made. Well, if it's a minor incursion, do you think President Zelensky is sitting there thinking, well, maybe if I give away a third of my country, it's okay with President Biden? That's basically the message that this president has just given away. Yeah, why don't you, let's give away Texas and California. It's just 2 states in America. Can you imagine another leader saying that? to another world leader, telegraphing it to the world at a moment like this. This is extraordinary to me. Take a listen. This is former NATO representative from the United States, Kurt Volker, who was shocked by that remark.
Well, first off, I agree with him, and I think this is largely because of the character and the will and the fight of the Ukrainian people. They are so dedicated to protecting their homeland, they will never fully be taken over. And that is their fight, and they have pushed the Russians away from Kyiv and from other major cities. But what that statement does is it also signals that, okay, but maybe Russia will take parts of Ukraine, and it's unclear what our response to that is. I think we need to be signaling to Ukraine that they have a right to their own territory, their own airspace. If they are going to fight to take this back, we understand and we will continue to support them.
It telegraphs trouble. And take a listen. This is Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary under President Bush, also was quite shocked.
Now, in terms of the statement President Biden made today about they will never suppress or control all of Ukraine, this harkens back, Martha, to one of the biggest mistakes Joe Biden made when at a news conference prior to the Russian invasion, he said, well, you know, if they kind of have a minor incursion, that's probably going to be okay. We probably wouldn't do anything. We'll talk to our allies and maybe we'll be split. This harkens right back to that same sentiment, that there's parts of Ukraine that are just fine in letting a sovereign nation, Russia, invade and take over. The answer is no. Territorial integrity is territorial integrity, and you don't start as the American president yielding it, giving it up in a rhetorical statement that as he did.
Yeah, who is President Biden to say, you know what, Ukraine, you know what, maybe you don't have to give away, you know, all of the country, but part of the country essentially is okay if Russia takes it over. That's what he basically signaled to Vladimir Putin at a time that he is encircling Mariupol and wants to take the eastern part of that country. Don't you think there's something wrong with an American president telegraphing that to the world? I find that unconscionable, and I find it outrageous. He should be saying, if you put 1 inch on Ukrainian soil, that's what he should have said months ago. And obviously, he missed that opportunity. And now he should be saying, how dare you, Vladimir Putin, you get out of Ukraine. You walk out of Ukraine. Don't you dare continue your ruthless assault, your genocidal assault on Ukraine. You get the heck out of that country, and we're going to make sure that you get heck out of the country, every inch of that soil, every inch of Ukrainian soil. Why didn't he say that? Why didn't our president say that? Why did he say you will never basically control all of Ukraine? Is he telegraphing what Biden wants privately? Remember, we also found out that early on, Biden offered, the U.S. administration offered Zelensky a ride out of the country because Zelensky said that. And Zelensky said he turned them down and said, no, thank you. I don't need a ride. I need weapons. And they have been fighting tooth and nail. And this administration, for some reason, has been pansying around and is scared of Vladimir Putin for so many reasons. And by the way, in the next hour, we're going to be talking to James Carafano, who is a great military strategist with the Heritage Foundation, to get his take on what the situation is militarily on the ground, because the Ukrainians have made some major strides. Of course, they are dealing with some big blows happening right now in Mariupol, but we're going to get a great assessment from him as to where he thinks things are going. But how dare our American president? And take a listen. This does harken back to what Ari Fleischer just talked about, that minor incursion comment that this president made. Take a listen.
And so I think what you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable if it invades. And it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera. But if they actually do what they're capable of doing with the force amassed on the border, it is going to be a disaster for Russia.
Yeah, minor incursion. Remember, everybody went, wait. So you're allowing for a minor incursion? And sure enough, they stood back. They let Putin invade, and now they're acting reactive. And now you see what he just said. To me, I think he's telegraphing what the Biden administration's philosophy is, that they would be more than happy, even though they're not the ones. It's not their country. It's Zelensky's country and his people's country. But I think he's telegraphing to the world that, you know what, we're more than happy if Russia gets that eastern part of the country, and then we'll just call it a day and we'll just move on. That's the way he handles foreign diplomacy. What do you think of that? Because I think he just talks and says what he thinks. I think he has no filter. It's like an old person in a senior citizen home when they just kind of say, you know, what they think. And you go, did grandma just say that to me? That's what grandma's always felt, but she never told me at the reunions. But now that she's up in age, boy, is she speaking out. That's how I think President Biden is. I think he just can't help himself. And I think he is telegraphing what they are thinking privately, that they're more than comfortable selling out Ukraine no matter what. Because what else explains the reason that he's been doing drip, 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 drip on military weapons, but nothing really of substance. And now they're like, oh, gosh, maybe the Ukrainian people can win. Almost no thanks to the United States and their drip, 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 drip policy. And let's go to Sonia in Vermont on line 5. Sonia, your thoughts.
Hi, Rita. Thank you for taking my call. My thoughts is my heart aches right now because I love the United States of America, and I just don't understand why the White House and President Joe Biden's wife and family have allowed him to continue and why he hasn't been impeached. It saddens to see the president in such disarray in his health, and why is he still leading our country? It's really dangerous.
Now, Sonia, how old are you?
I am 52.
You are? Okay. I just wanted to get your thoughts. All right. So what are you equated to, you know, in modern times that you've seen? What are you equated to? Because I do think it's a dangerous situation, Sonia, don't you?
It is dangerous. And, you know, I've been a nursing assistant for 30 years, and it's clear to me that he has mental illness right now, and it looks like he has signs of dementia. He doesn't know. It's like that night when he was following Obama and, you know, through the House, it was like they ignored him, and they totally did not even acknowledge him as the president. It was like President Obama was actually the president and not even Joe Biden. I don't understand why he's allowed to continue to be the president when his health is failing.
Yeah, and now, so you are in the mental arena. What do you diagnose that you're seeing here? What type of degradation are you seeing?
I just feel like he has dementia. His capabilities, he can't remember what's happening, what's going on, the questions that are being asked. He can't even stand in front of reporters and be asked questions about our country.
Yeah, and these are serious times. And Sonia, you know, the thing is, Sonia, too, it's always a serious time. When you're, you know, obviously the leader of the free world, it's the greatest country in the world, and it's a leadership position for the world, the United States is. And it's always important to have a president who's on the ball, but it's even more important now when you see just how dangerous the world is. You got open borders. We got reports of terrorists coming through our open borders. And then we have the situation of Russia, Ukraine, the war there. I mean, it's like this combination. It's almost like of all times, you can't have somebody who can't answer the question correctly and who can't even keep the topic straight. It's even more frightening. And the thing is, too, Sonia, is Joe Biden. I've met Joe Biden many times through the years. He is a much quippier, sharper, feistier guy in his heyday, you know, and for many decades, you know, the Joe Biden of years ago, and not that many years ago, was a lot more spirited, a lot feistier, could keep facts straight, was a good debater. I mean, there were a lot of things. So like when he was on, you know, debating Paul Ryan, he did a great job. But for some reason, in the last few years, and there's something going on, to your point, physically, it has been going down and down and down. And it's just like the people in the White House, it's like every day they're like, whoa, 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 this gaffe happened, this day happened. And Tim Murtaugh was just reciting, also remember the trip when he was in Poland? He was reciting, telling the U.S. troops they're going to Ukraine. Also, if there's chemical weapons, we're going to respond in kind, you know, and also calling for regime change with Putin. I mean, those were like three ones within, it was like a 24, 48 hours. It's like, I wonder who's sitting there going, they need like a beep, you know, every time he talks. And that's frightening. And as we're finding out in the last few hours, the situation is so difficult, particularly in the town of Mariupol. That is that key port town, and that is on the eastern side of the country. And that is sort of in the heart of where Putin is trying to create a land bridge, basically from the top eastern part of the country to the bottom eastern part of the country. And he needs to take over Mariupol to kind of have a fluid land bridge, if you will. And so he is pounding that city with everything. And we know that in a steel plant there are still soldiers from Ukraine that are fighting with everything they have. They are saying we are not surrendering. But what they are asking for is safe passage for women and children that are inside, that are in the steel plant. And we're hearing that in the town of Mariupol, there's about 100,000 people. And Putin so far, at least around the steel plant, this is amazing. Think about the brutality of this. He basically told his forces today, don't level the steel plant. Don't pound it. What I want you to do is basically stand around it, stay outside to make sure nothing gets into them. No food, no water, no munitions. He is basically trying to starve thousands of people to death. This situation is just getting so horrific, and that is why American leadership right now is so pivotal, not just for Ukraine, but for the situation of what could happen if Mariupol falls and other parts of Ukraine fall too. And that could happen very soon. And many people are saying, why didn't we get them the weapons sooner? Why didn't we get in things sooner? Putin was telegraphing what he was going to do, and he's getting worse and worse and worse. And inside Mariupol, they are pleading. Take a listen. Here is a Ukrainian soldier, basically the commander there of that unit that's inside that steel plant, with a message to the world.
This is our appeal to the world. This could be the last appeal of our lives. We are probably facing our last days, if not ours. The enemy's outnumbering us 10-1.
The enemy, the Russian forces, are outnumbering the Ukrainian forces. They're 10-1. How could we let this happen, guys? How could we be in this position now? We are the most powerful country in the world. We are a partner of NATO. We've been working in sync with NATO. We're supposed to be leading the charge in NATO. And yet, at this moment, it's basically the Ukrainian Alamo in Mariupol. And it looks like potentially tens of thousands of people are on the verge of being slaughtered in that city alone. They're discovering more mass graves, also by a cemetery that was just uncovered just a little bit ago. Details about more horrific mass graves being found out there. How is the most powerful country in the world in this position right now? What did we do wrong? What did this administration do wrong? And why are we in this position where now it looks like tens of thousands of people are about to be slaughtered, and we're not interceding at this moment? We're not calling for safe evacuations. And the mayor of Mariupol right now is pleading for that. Take a listen to what he said.
Unfortunately, today it is not possible to evacuate Mariupol residents from Azovstal. Why? Because we are asking for a sustained ceasefire. We need at least one day to inform our residents who have been sheltering there for the 57th day in a row.
57th day in a row. You heard that right. They've been hiding there, women and children. And right now, the Biden administration doesn't seem to even be pressing to push for a safe evacuation, to say, hey, Russian troops, at least let the women and children and the men, the civilians get out. The soldiers want to stay and fight. The ones who are healthy, they want to stay and fight. But at least get the wounded out and get the civilians out. Why are we not doing anything? I mean, what message, first of all, does that send, not just to Ukraine, but to the world? What does that send to China? What does that send to North Korea? What does that send to Iran? And what does that send to our other allies who say, okay, right now, we're not creating some sort of forced effort to Russia to say, stand back? We have a president who says, well, he won't get control of all of Ukraine. Maybe he'll just get control of the eastern part of the country. Sorry, Zelensky. Is that the message coming from our president? Well, take a listen. This is Kurt Volker, who was a NATO representative And he said he is shocked by what's happening by the Russians.
The brutality of Russia's invasion across the board here, whether it's the deliberate targeting and killing of civilians, the mass graves that you just showed there, or now, as we see, a deliberate tactic of trying to starve out the remaining resistance rather than fight them head on. It's really stunning.
It is so unbelievably stunning. And joining us now to talk about all of this now is James Carafano with the Heritage Foundation, Vice President for Foreign and Security Policy. I have to get your take, James, on what is happening right now in Mariupol, because, boy, it just sounds so just horrible.
Well, you know, the U.S. has been through this before. 1956, Hungarian uprising, 1968, the Czech Revolution. Both were efforts to throw off the control of the Soviet Union, and the U.S. really couldn't do anything because it was on the other side of that curtain. And this is a very similar situation. But when you ask, I mean, you keep asking the right question, which was, how did we get here in really such a predictable place? And it was. You know, look, I mean, it's not a partisan comment. You know, nothing I say is really, you know, I'm picking on one political party or the other. But we all want America to be successful. We all want America to be a force for good in the world. You know, it's funny because tonight at our annual meeting, you know, Donald Trump came and speak to us. And to me, the most powerful, important thing he said is when America is strong, the world sleeps safer. And what we've seen in the last 2 years of this presidency, which is what we saw in the 8 years of the Obama presidency, was the lack of recognition of the basic notion when you confront regimes like Iran and Russia and China, and that is weakness doesn't beget friendship. Weakness invites aggression. And when you show a weak face to these countries, they take advantage of that. I mean, this was the lesson that Ronald Reagan taught us when he talked about peace through strength. It wasn't intimidating other people. It wasn't pushing other people around. It was when evil people come at you, what forces them to back strong. You know, it's like when you show the sign of the cross to the vampire. It's the power of strength. And what Biden did from the day he came into office was send the wrong signals to the Russians. And then when it was incredibly clear for over a year that Putin was massing for this war, all we did was we tried to somehow placate and demonstrate weakness. If we had done the things that we do today just a year ago, the Russians would have never attacked because they would have seen that Ukraine is armed and resourced and supported, and Putin would not have risked that. So there isn't, you know, I'm a historian in addition to having a career in the military, and I know you read history books and you want that somehow there's got to be an answer to this. There's got to be a solution that solves all the problems, and the reality of reality is that often it doesn't happen. And just like in 1956 and 1968, when we stood there and we watched terrible things happen. My answer to that is if you didn't want those horrible bad things to happen, then you should have done something beforehand. And that's the situation that we're facing today. And even today, I think if we had not been so slow in terms of pushing the arms and the support to the Ukrainians that they need, they would have been much better able to try to lift the siege of Mariupol. And now we're playing this racing game, trying to get stuff in there that will allow them to kind of take enough offensive to break the siege of the city. I just don't know how we get that stuff there fast enough now.
Yeah, and now we're trying to, but just like you just said, we're so behind the eight ball, James Carafano, and that's the problem. You know, I also want to get your reaction to this comment, too, because you were with President Trump tonight, as you just talked about, and he was always very sort of clear on leadership. And just as you said, it's sort of strength begets, respect when you're dealing with people like a Putin and somebody who wishes to do the world harm. I want to play a comment, James, that President Biden made just a few hours ago. It was really astounding, and get your reaction. Here it is.
Our unity at home, Our unity with our allies and partners and our unity with the Ukrainian people is sending an unmistakable message to Putin. He will never succeed in dominating and occupying all of Ukraine.
Now, James, a lot of people are taking, and I want to get your thoughts from a military perspective on this, when he says he will never succeed in dominating all of Ukraine. Right away, people came out and went, whoa, 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 whoa. The answer should be from the leader of America, would have been, don't touch 1 inch of Ukraine. You will never succeed in having an inch of Ukraine. It's a sovereign country. But it almost sounds like he's ready to give away part of Ukraine to Russia.
Look, this is the bystander in chief in action. What you're not getting is a vision. You're not getting a goal. You're not getting a direction. What you're getting is a description of what is going on today. Because Ukraine didn't collapse in a New York minute, which is what the administration expected, which is why they did nothing. Because the Ukrainians fought and held their ground, then the Europeans said, oh, okay, well, we've got to support them. And the U.S. went along with that. And because, Afghanistan was such a disaster, Biden didn't dare do nothing. And yeah, the vast majority of Americans want to see this as an unjust war and want to support the Ukrainians. So what you heard from the president was a description of what is going on in the world. You didn't hear from the president saying, and this is what we're going to do about it. And this has been the problem with this administration all the time. Their response is always, what is the minimum I can do, the minimum risk I can take? Obama had this famous thing of leading from behind, and we're not even leading from behind. Essentially, we're following what everybody is doing. This is a presidency that is dragged along by momentum. It is the opposite of what you saw, for example, in a Reagan presidency or an Eisenhower or a Trump presidency. A vision of going to a powerful place, because the obsession of this administration. I mean, if you take everything the president's talked about in the last couple of weeks, the talk about climate, and it's still all about climate. It's still all about the domestic things that they want to do. That's his focus. It's not about leading the nation through a crisis. And I think his own words on that are pretty clear and distinct on that. There's the sentence of Ronald Reagan, saying, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. This vision of going to a place. And instead, what you hear from Biden is something like you would hear from a news anchor saying, well, here's where we are today. We're not going to conquer all of Ukraine. Well, we all know they're not going to conquer all of Ukraine because the Ukrainians are fighting for that. So what is the president adding? What is the leadership that he is bringing to this?
No, you're right. He's not leading from the front. And just as you said, when America doesn't lead from the front and doesn't lead and is sort of cowering, as it seems in many ways, to Putin and really leading, not even leading, but just kind of like drifting from behind, I think I use the description, James, that it's sort of like a rudderless leadership. And right now we're seeing what's happening in Mariupol. I mean, where's the leadership now?
And in contrast to that, again, I'm not because I'm working in a nonpartisan think tank. I'm not even a Republican. I don't even belong to a political party. But contrast this with the other line that stuck with me from Trump's speech today. He goes, everybody thought I liked Putin, except Putin. Putin feared Trump, and he feared Trump because Trump did things. These guys, they look at what we do, not what we say. The defining moment of Middle East history could have been when Trump took out Soleimani, the lead terrorist in Iran.
Yep.
He was actually in Iraq organizing attacks against Americans, and for the 2 presidents before him were constantly warned, you can't go after this guy. That's a red line. But Trump not only went after him, he took him out in Iraq, and the Iranian response to that was incredibly predictable. Did they rain fire and hell down on the United States? No. They actually said, this is a man to fear. There's a very similar incident that happened in Syria where some Russian mercenaries attacked a U.S. compound, and the U.S. response to that was the president ordered that they just basically bomb the guys off the face of the earth. And the response from Putin, which I've heard from a number of different diplomatic sources, so I believe it was, well, okay, let's not do that again.
Yeah,
So,
and there's no sense of fear now, and that, I think,
that's
sadly,
exactly right.
Right, and that is sad, and it's sad. Obviously, it's sad for America, it's sad for the world, and boy, is it sad, for the people in Ukraine and Mariupol right now, because they're going, wait a minute, we thought America would help us. We thought America would lead this pack, and now they have such a different president that's leading the charge. And meanwhile, they're fighting with everything they have, which is just, it's been extraordinary. James, thank you so much. James Carafano, the senior vice president there over at Heritage Foundation, and great military guy, vice president for foreign and security policy at Heritage Foundation. Thank you so much, James.